All right. Well, just want to welcome everybody to Conversations with Quadre featuring our guest, Jeff Scott. We're super excited to have him here. And welcome to Michigan Horn Studio is here listening, and we may have some other guests coming in too to listen. We'll let you guys in Michigan Horn Studio to be seen by Jeff and to be able to ask him questions after about 45 minutes of conversation. So Jeff's super important guy in the horn world, teaching at Oberlin now, and composing and performing, and has done all these things at a super high professional level for a long time. So it'd be interesting to hear from him about his projects, including one that he's doing with Quadre, a composition. And I'd also like to introduce Daniel Wood to you. Daniel is the founder and the only surviving founding member of Quadre. He's founded it back in 1998, and he keeps it going with a lot of skill. And I'm happy to be a member of this quartet and to get to work with Daniel. So I'll turn it over to Daniel now, and he will be doing the bulk of the interviewing with Jeff. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Adam, and welcome, Jeff. This is super awesome. We have had probably, I don't know, 20 conversations by phone in the past year, but I don't think we've actually seen each other during the process of this commission. So it's nice, very cool. So I'd love to kind of, when we're diving in here and talking about you and your life and how important, as Adam said, how important you are to the horn community. I think and tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems like your membership with the Imani Winds from like 97 to 2021, like that really made a major impact. That you were able to kind of take all the things that you bring to the table as a multi-instrumentalist, as a composer, as a performer, as a producer, and bring that to bear in Imani Winds. So can you just talk a little bit about not only your participation in that, but maybe the legacy that has been created through that group?
Well, you're right. And first of all, thank you, Adam, and thank you, Daniel, both for having me to chat a little bit with the folks here, but also, for bringing me into the fold to write the piece for your ensemble, which I'm sure we'll touch on later. We all as musicians, we mature, certain parts of our lives. There are things that we do, associations that we have, groups we play in, whatever the case may be, but there's whatever it is, it helps you to mature as a human being, as a musician, or whatever craft you're in. And, as much as, I had a relatively prosperous couple of years before I got into Imani Winds, I was just a dumb kid running around, playing anything and everything with not much musical thought for a few years, until I sat in the chair in this ensemble and started being asked to really make mature, meaningful, and impactful musical decisions. Not just about like how I played the instrument, but musically speaking, like what were you trying to say as a musician? What is it that you want to leave behind that folks leaving a hall will remember? I never thought about those things. I was playing Broadway shows and any pickup gigs, and no disrespect to any of that line of work, but it just hadn't ever dawned on me, what it is I was trying to say musically. And the group was the place that all of that started just becoming a thing. That's what you thought about. It wasn't just that we were playing the Haas and the Villalobos and but why this programming? Why are we doing that commission? Why are we going to that community? All kinds of things started becoming really important, and that's where I really sort of formed as just a person, a musical and thoughtful person because of those four women that I spent so many years with.
And you talk about how you've kind of cultivated this urban classical music sound. Like, you go to your website, that's the first thing you see. I've for an hour this morning, I was just poring over every single website that had Jeffrey Scott's name in it. I know. It was a scary experience, really, for me too. Because your smile is so infectious. I was like, I just couldn't, for the hour after that, I was just walking around like this. But those three words kept coming up again and again and again. And you talk about your experience when you're growing up and how that affected the way you kind of see classical music through maybe a particular lens, maybe not a unique lens, but a particular lens, and then how that's influenced you as a composer. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Well, in all honesty, it's a topic that I could spend a considerable amount of time talking about.
We got about 40 minutes. Go for it.
Trust me, it'd be 40 hours. But the basic idea for me, which, like you said, it's not unique because, not the first African-American musician, but the lived experience is very similar in that, I grew up being attracted to classical music and the instrument. And it was mainly because it just was fascinating to me that you could learn how to play this instrument, and you can learn these pieces, and you can be in the same room with like-minded people that kind of were geeks just like me and loved this thing, that we didn't really understand. But then there came a point in doing this where I looked around and there were very few people who looked like me who did it. And then add to it the music that I was playing, while it was great, it seemed to me it was like we're all doing the same kind of things that they did 100 years ago, 200 years ago. And it was all by the same 12, 15 composers. And it was great music, but it was all that anyone ever played. And so after a while, it just became like, all right, this is great, but isn't there more? There's got to be more. It's got to be, And it wasn't taught in school. But, I grew up in Far Rockaway, Queens, in New York City. My best friend was from Puerto Rico. My other best friend was Orthodox Jew, was the best man at my wedding. And I sat Seder and I danced at merengue parties. And it seemed to me that great music that I grew up knowing, along with the Haitian music and the African-American, blues and all that stuff that I grew up, that just never, somehow just, why wasn't it part of the canon? Why is it that there's only just that music that was from those 12 or 15 composers that's considered classical music? Why is that? Why is that the theory of music? Why is it all based there? I didn't know. And trust me, these questions weren't as prevalent as they are right now. But it just seemed to me like I just didn't have a space, a place in music where the things that I grew up with, not necessarily just blues and jazz, but everything that I grew up with just didn't have a place in what I love to do. And it was accepted by everybody that I was around that was just the case. You learn Mozart, Beethoven, and Brahms, and that was it. That was classical music. But then the question started to be asked some, years ago, like, why does that have to be the case? And I ended up being part of an ensemble that not only asked the question why, but said, well, let's do something about it. Let's just do something, and see what happens. And at the end of the day, what ended up happening was me and a wonderful woman by the name of Valerie Coleman, who was the original flute player and the founding member of Imani Winds. We just decided to compose it. Their help. And nowadays, people are boasting about how great their recording is of the Florence Price Third Symphony. Now it's, that music is decades ago. We knew I didn't know about it, but they knew it was great then. And so, like I said, I could talk about it for years and years and years, hours and hours and hours. But I think that, again, just the maturation of me as a person, as a musician and musical thinker, led me to wanting to express all of these things in just the way I walked my life in music. Now, I don't walk into my dean's office at Oberlin and say, everything within reason, I guess. But
don't worry. Right at that point, I'm just going to cut out that little dean's part, so that won't be on posterity.
I'll tell you, our first faculty meeting, I thought I was going to get fired because I really kind of put my foot in it about the theory we were teaching. But the point is, and I know I'm way off point because I can't even remember what your question was at this point.
Don't worry, it was a good question. But I think it's interesting.
I remember, yes.
Yeah. I think it's interesting what you just said, though, because looking at Imani Winds, like you said, okay, in 5 years, we're going to commission all of these composers and we're going to make this project happen and then we're going to renew it. And one of the cool things, if you just check out a Wikipedia article about the group, is there's this huge chart of all this new music that you've brought to the fore. And then just a few minutes ago, you said now it's a little different. Like they are celebrating these works like by Florence Price and the like. So do you feel it's a different kind of place that we're in terms of classical music, or do you feel like we've just taken our first step and there's quite a few steps that need to be taken?
Oh, it's definitely a first step. There's because at the end of the day, what it really has to come down to is what's taught. What we don't want is now for the next 15 years that we choose 6 pieces from William Grant Still, Ollie Wilson and Florence Price and say, all right, we're going to play these 3 pieces and say, guess what? We did it.
We're good now. Yeah.
We're good now. That, and that's just, it's about what we consider pedagogy. And that opens up a huge can of worms and makes a lot of people uncomfortable. So, like I said, it's a first step, but I think, in lieu of the many steps that need to be taken, it then is upon us as musicians, as living, working, and progressive musicians to do what we can. And, the things that you guys are doing is very much in that vein. I can't tell you how honored I am to have been asked by you all to write this piece. And you gave me the free rein to write in the style that I write, bringing my style of music. And that means a lot. It really does. It really means a lot.
And we'll get to Terra Sacrum, Sacred Earth. That's the work that he wrote for Quadre very soon. I want to touch upon 2 other works, though, that you have written. One was premiered by the Detroit Symphony back in November. If you had Branford Marsalis on the program. That was Paradise Valley's Serenade. Can you talk about what that was like?
Oh, man, talk about a treat. Set aside, that it's, a professional orchestra playing your music. And so, it becomes, I wrote that? Really?
Right.
When somebody good actually plays your music, they definitely do better than it deserves. But again, it was about a topic. It was a style of music and about a topic that doesn't normally get addressed in the classical music canon. So Paradise Valley is a section of Detroit, along with another city entitled Black Bottom, Detroit, which really doesn't exist anymore. African-American neighborhoods during the Great Migration, so the turn of the century. Previous to that was Irish and Jewish neighborhoods. The Ford Company calls folks up from the South, says, we have jobs for you. They come up there for work, to get out of the Jim Crow South. They find that they're making a pretty decent wage. They move into this area because that's where folks of color were allowed to live in the Detroit area. And it's rough, but folks are making money, and they create a community that thrives, that becomes like Harlem, New York. You know, everything's Black owned, and you've got banks and dentists and jazz clubs and restaurants and hotels, and it's just becomes like the place to be from like 1930 something to like 1960 something. And during that time, Orchestra Hall, where the Detroit Symphony does all of its concerts, actually closed down. The Depression hit, things like got really funky in the area, and you know what goes first? Culture. So the orchestra shut down, but it opened up as a jazz club. Somebody with a little dough said, "Hey, well, we can open it up. We can do some great shows of jazz on this amazing stage." So Orchestra Hall became known for a 10-year period as Paradise Theater, because it was part of the Paradise Valley area.
Right.
And everybody, Duke Ellington, Cab Calloway, you name it, they would come and they'd do a week there. And so what ended up happening, to make a really long story short, was that folks who just had other agendas, let's just say, decided that it was too prosperous. And so we're going to just tear this down. And they created urban renewal projects that basically meant they were going to put Highway 75 right through the heart of Paradise Valley and Black Bottom. And that meant that all of those clubs, restaurants, banks got torn down. It happened over about a 20-year period, but it happened nonetheless. The orchestra approached me because they wanted to pay homage to the history of the hall itself during that period, but also to the neighborhood. And so I wrote a 3-movement work for that. It put the wind quintet up front as soloists, but it's really an orchestral work that really spoke to the jazz idiom and classical idiom, because that's what I do. I grew up, I learned how to score Beethoven piano sonatas for, string orchestra. That's what, that's you learn. I'm not knocking, you got to learn your stuff, but then there's got to be room for other things. That's what I'm saying here. And so I learned my craft by my orchestration teacher at Stony Brook University saying, here's Beethoven piano sonata number blah, blah, blah. Score it for orchestra of strings, timpani, and, a flute, and you learned, that's how you learn your craft. And so when I wrote this piece, of course, it's going to have classical idioms and beautiful solos for cello and all that stuff, but then it's going to swing. Boop, 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 boop. So it swings. That's where the urban part comes in.
And I think that one of the comments you just made about highways, like not decimating Black communities, I saw an article in the Atlantic recently about it. I'm not sure the article I'm putting right now in the chat right now is similar. It's talking about the role of highways in American poverty, and there was a follow-up article to that. But look out for this, because it did, in the name of progress, so much was done in the 60s and 70s to basically try to change the dynamics, especially in the big cities. And you had, in another interview you you talked about one of your favorite books being The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkinson. And I had not read the book, but I was just working and reading the synopsis this morning and just blown away by the text. And do you find that you get, because I want to speak to another one of your projects very soon, a lot of inspiration from literary sources?
Yes. If not for people like Miss Wilkerson, great poets, great authors, and my desire to study history, I wouldn't know about half the stuff I'm talking about right now. I just wouldn't. It's, no one, the Great Migration is not taught in school. It's touched on, but boy, it's just not. And so, and then told, not just from a historical point of view, but a human point of view. It just tells the story of America. It's the whole story. When you understand the whole story, you end up not hating anybody, but just understanding that we could be so much more. We could be so much more if we just understood all this, And so, it informs so much of what I do, because I read something, I go, I didn't know about Detroit. I didn't know. I just didn't know. It's sad that I didn't know that there was another place just like Harlem that existed and got torn down, but I read.
I just put that text, by the way, in the chat. So if you're interested in finding out more about it, it's called The Warmth of Other Suns, The Epic Story of America's Great Migration by Isabel Wilkerson. I'd like to find out more then about A.B. Spellman, this wonderful project you had with Imani Winds, passion for Bach and Coltrane. Before you speak to it, I'd love to just play a little preview for everyone so they can kind of get an overview of the project. Without further ado, let me do that for you all and make sure I got the right one in front of me. There we are. Okay. And the wonderful thing is just having zillions of screens in front of you. There you go.
My swing is more mellow these days, not the hard bop drive I used to roll, but more of a cool foxtrot. My eyes still close when the rhythm locks. I've learned to boogie with my feet on the floor. I'm still moving, still grooving, still falling in love. Many of my poems seem to me to be musical, which was natural because music is probably most of what I spend my life listening to. And even without trying, I think that it seeps into my words.
So what was interesting was hearing how I think the music was a platform for the words.
Ends up supporting it as opposed to, being sort of an undercurrent to it. What I have are musicians that are fearless. And so you hear them switch from Bach to Coltrane on a flip of the dime.
A wind ensemble and a string quartet actually coming together for an original composition is quite appealing.
One more thing is the jazz combo comes in. And it kind of he uses the word yummy, and I think it works. It gives that, you're not expecting when the jazz combo breaks off and does, while the poetry reading's being done.
It's just very rewarding to see what a really terrific artist like Jeff has drawn from my work. He has heard things in these poems, seen things in these poems that I did not imagine when I made them.
I am addicted to jazz. And later in life, when I started traveling, especially in Central and South America, I was just overtaken by Latin music. So much of what I do is influenced by that. That's what attracted me to those particular poems in that book, because it allowed me to express in all of the genres of music that I so enjoy.
Wow. That's all I can say. I mean, I started watching because on the website, your website, you can find not only that preview, and I'll put that website in the chat shortly, but also a full production of it, so you can hear the whole thing if you like. Please tell us how that all came about.
And well, it's a funny thing because I just like boasted about how much I like to read. And A.B. Spellman, the gentleman in the video, that's Toyin Spellman's dad, the oboe player in
Okay.
that he gave us as a gift for Christmas a copy of his latest book of poetry. He's a famous poet. And I took the book, I said, thank you. I put it on my shelf, and 3 years passed. I had no idea. It's embarrassing. And then I think it was 2013 or something like that. I was actually looking for something, something reading, and I was like, yeah, I need to read AB's book. I'm not a big poet. Like, I don't read books of poetry. I might read one poem. But I'm going to read his book because he gave it to me. It's a gift. So I open it up, and I'm not, no exaggeration. I read, I think I got to the third or the fourth poem, and I stopped, and I emailed him, and I said, AB, we gotta do something. I was like, you just read the book. So what did I say? It ain't on my face. But man, he speaks, he's an extremely learned person, especially when it comes to religions. Though he's atheist, which is like ridiculous to understand because where it comes from is just so learned. Anyways, the way he talks about the great artists of music, and so he looks at Bach as the greatest master of classical music. He thinks Coltrane is equal in jazz, and he just thought about what would happen if they somehow up in pearly gates just like met somewhere and like started to jam. Like, what would that be like? And anybody who knows anything about Bach knows that he could improvise anything. So all he needed to be like was be immersed in the jazz scene and be like, oh, I got it. Hang on, let's go. It would have been ridiculous, in other words, so the piece is kind of based loosely on that, and also the telling of the Passion of Christ, which I encourage the folks listening to this right now to go and listen to. There's a movement entitled Out of Nazareth, where he basically, in a very jazz and raw kind of almost street kind of way, tells about the Passion of Christ. And it's powerful, I have to say. It's extremely powerful. And when you read this, and I read this in this poetry, the music was like, that was the easy part. It just oozed out. It literally oozed out. And it's the longest thing I've ever written. The piece originally was an hour and 20 minutes. Cut it down. No presenter wanted to put it on. Cut it down to 1 hour. But that was, I had more, we toured that thing for so long, and it was just so gratifying to have all those forces, classically trained people, but some jazz musicians, but everybody vested in the fearlessness of just trying something that might make you feel uncomfortable. I'm not a jazz musician, but you had to come to it with an open mind, and it was just thrilling. It's truly one of the things that I miss about not being part of that ensemble, is those types of ventures that we get in, where it just stretched you way beyond what you're supposed to be. Like, I'm not supposed to be in this room. This is not my lane. But I'm here. So let's have a party.
So were you
So,
touring with the Harlem Quartet and the Jazz Trio around the country? Wow.
yep, 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 yep.
So
And
was
we were
Harlem
fortunate at that point. Sorry,
so was
please.
Harlem represented by the same management, so they were able to kind of coordinate all this?
They had separate management, and
Okay.
uh, you know, they were. We just, you know, I'm sure our management did the principal sort of booking, found the dates, and then they would coordinate with the other folks. Say, can you do this thing? But everybody was so vested in the project, and it was so different from what anything else that we were doing, that they would make room for it. They'd get out of stuff to be able to do it, you know. And it caught on well enough with presenting organizations, you know, folks talk, that folks would say, yeah, we know it's expensive, but you really want to have this because it brings in the whole community. You know, I mean, it was one of the first times I literally, you'd see, you know, pretty much even black and brown and white folks in the same hall, you know, because folks like, oh, yeah, I'm there. I'm there. And next thing you know, it's like not exactly what you expected, but everything you want to hear on the stage. And it was just, man, just magical, absolutely magical.
And it's awesome having a piece that kind of can serve that purpose, like that really does bring in the whole community, a very diverse community. Awesome, so cool. And we're so hopeful, actually, that Terra Sacrum can do something very similar for our community out here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So could you speak a little bit to that project? I mean, I can give a little bit of the backstory for those who don't know. So Quadre, back in 2019, we started a project called Music with a Message, and we decided to start aligning what we were presenting with community and social causes in our area. And so the very first thing we did was focus on the unhoused community. And so we presented a program last June called What is Home? And it was in collaboration with some local poets and local visual artists, a fantastic multimedia producer, Christopher Grant, who did these incredible visuals with us. And we were able to commission a wonderful artist named Nia Shaker, who, if you don't know her name yet, you will know her name soon, trust me. And Benjamin Shirley, who was actually living on Skid Row, incarcerated for over 2 years, and then and was formerly a rock musician, fell into addiction, and then out of that is now orchestrating for, you know, huge movies like the Fast and the Furious series. So he's seen it all, and he really understood what people that are unhoused, how they get there, and why they're there, and what they're dealing with. So it was an incredibly enriching project for us, and we felt like the next thing we really wanted to tackle was the environment. And so we have a program coming up in March called Nature Calling for Harmony. And we started our talks with Jeff about a year and a half ago. I think it was November 2020, just seeing whether he was interested. And thank goodness he said yes. And then it was just a matter of finding adequate funding. And so we went to a couple places, our State Arts Council, California Arts Council, Intermusic SF, and for all of our wonderful horn attendees here, the International Horn Society is also helping make this commission possible. So that's some of the backstory that went into this program. It's one of 5 premieres on this particular show, and it's all going to be tied to visual art. And so let me just show you the concert posters so you can take a look, and then I think that'll set up nicely what Jeff will tell you about the program itself. So this is the visual art of Haruo Sato, the art of hope, but there will be art of strife and innocence and awareness, a different visual for every single work in the program. So I've set you up. Go for it, Jeff. Tell us a little bit about the work.
Well, you know, the primary thing I wanted to do is find a point of departure to tell whatever story that I was going to tell in the music. And that, for me, is by far the most important thing. It's very hard for me to just write a piece of music, just to write a piece of music. I wouldn't even know where to start. So having all of the information that you gave me is sort of fodder. I started trying to find the links. So great that you have a bird on the poster, because a lot of the music that I wrote for you is about, metaphorically about birds, but it's about flight, it's about migration, it's about home, it's about what is home, who's considered at home, and whether you feel welcome in that space. So all of that sort of ties into metaphorically each movement. I also talk about, and I use specific poems from John Keats, Maya Angelou, and Pablo Neruda, because they each talk about, they use the imagery of birds, but in different ways. Specifically, folks might know about Maya Angelou, Why a Caged Bird Sings. And if you don't know that poem, suggest you look it up. But some extremely poignant lines in all of these poems about people's state of being, and how even in the most traumatic states they could be in, they manage to persevere. They sing, they create art, they have full lives, but it doesn't necessarily have to be this way. And imagine if it wasn't. Great line. And I'm trying to paraphrase. I think I have it. Well, I think I wrote it down here somewhere. Hang on a second here. Oh yeah. The Pablo Neruda says, "My creatures are born from a long rejection. And with a single alcohol, I could say goodbye to this day." I'm thinking about when you say my creatures, my offspring, my children are born from a long rejection. Every year, but for decades we've been rejected, and it could get so bad that I could just drink it all away. I could just, and that's in poetry. That's in poetry. That only reflects life. To me, there was nothing more powerful than that. The projects that I get into, when they have this much important content, the music part is the easy part. And I said it before about I could have written easily another 20, 30 minutes worth of music. Easily. It's just not, but again, it allowed me to dive into different styles. And so, it's contemporary classical. We have the voices, which is really, really important to have the choir, the quartet, which hopefully one day will be a choir. Get into tango. Adam's going to blow. Adam's going to do his thing, talking about and jazz. It just allowed me to dive into all the styles and put that all into music. And horn ensemble music just historically is very it's almost band-like. There's some great pieces out there for the most part. It's done. It's always like that, and it's fun, but it very rarely gets into this sort of deep topics. Immigration. Where I'm just here for the party. Combined with choirs has been done, but then having somebody blow changes and that sort of style. So I just felt like this was a great opportunity to introduce audiences to more levels of what our horn community can do. And you guys are fearless, so you're the ones, man. I don't know any other quartet that would have taken this on.
I must admit, it is a huge undertaking. I mean, especially I don't have a lot of vocal chops, I'll be honest. And so I've been talking to a lot of different vocal directors and finding just the right voice types to match what you've written. And I know originally the intent was for it to be for gospel choir, piano, and four horns. And now it's for four highly trained singers, piano and on horn, because the vocal parts are not easy by any means. But actually, when I approached the gospel choir originally, because the Oakland Interfaith Gospel Choir was interested in this project, I talked a little bit about the oral tradition, and I know that was going to be a big part of this work. And I'm curious why you chose to go a different direction with it.
Well, the first thing is I should admit that when I thought about the gospel choir, I had a completely different idea about when you all would break off and sort of do something a little bit more ethnic. I had a completely different idea of what that was going to be. It was going to be sort of a down home blues that would then develop into a gospel, then have the choir and so on and so forth. And what ended up happening was the poetry that I ended up gravitating to just didn't sing to me in that genre. So I was gravitated to tango, and so that became its own separate thing. And then the contemporary classical stuff, it's got, these weird interval jumps and very independent, challenging lines. And the average gospel choir, that they don't negotiate that style the same that I'm hearing. They do it, but not in the way that I'm envisioning, especially since it's going to be individual soloists at first. And so that it takes them out of a comfort zone that doesn't necessarily have to be so. So that's why we ended up going more towards that.
Well, we're greatly looking forward to premiering it on March 27th, and we are in talks with hoping to live stream it as well. So it either will happen at the actual performance or we'll record it and then release that a little bit later. So stay tuned. We'll let you all know about it for sure. At this point, I would love for us to open this conversation up to everyone. So what Adam's going to start doing is he's going to make all of you into panelists. So once you're panelists, you can join us on the video, and you'll be able to, we'll all be able to see each other and ask questions of Jeff. So Adam, I just want to make sure you are able to start doing that. Okay.
Yes, doing it.
Okay, cool. And want to make sure that people are able to turn their video on. I see Adam Julian's the first person in. Are they able to turn their video on, or is that an issue?
I cannot.
You cannot. Yeah, I had a feeling that might be the case. So what I'm going to have to do, I think, is make all of you into co-hosts. And when I make you into a co-host, then you'll have that ability to turn on your video. Okay, so I'll be doing that while Adam's bringing you in. So we'll just take a moment to make that happen. And once I make you a co-host, please go ahead and turn your video on. We'd love to see you. Who knew this many people could be hosts?
So U of M students, if you have not received this, please put it in the chat, okay? It doesn't tell me exactly who's now a finalist.
It looks like 11 people are still attendees.
All right.
We're getting there.
So Jack, I'll find you here. Andy. Michael, okay.
Very good to see you all, by the way. Okay. Last time we did this, we didn't have to make it everyone a co-host. So I have a feeling I just maybe did something wrong when I set this up in the first place. So I'll make sure though. Make it easier in the future.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Yeah, this looks good. I think this is the crew here.
Okay, so at this point, while we just bring in the last couple of people, is there anyone who has a question? Just you can either raise your hand, physical hand, or you can go ahead and raise it virtually, however you like to do it. And don't be shy. This is your chance. Jeff was, I'll just mention a few of other highlights of his career, just other things, food for thought for you. He started the revival of Showboat. That's way back in 1994. He did Lion King on Broadway from 1997 through 2005. Works with Alvin Alley Dance Company. Also has worked with jazz at Lincoln Center. We only focused on a few of his works, but a lot of his music has been showcased by chamber ensembles around the country and world. There's a fabulous recording of the Acropolis Quintet performing one of his works, Paradise Theater Jump. So hopefully that gave you some things to think about and ask. And your group, I believe, all got started at Oberlin. Is that correct?
At this point, the latest flute player, Brandon, he's a grad of Oberlin, and Valerie had not been. But at this point now, they've got 3 Obies in the band.
Oh. Cool.
Something that strikes me, Jeff, hearing your story, is how lucky we are that you found Imani, that group started, basically. You said you were hanging around New York freelancing and taking whatever gig came its way. But what you ended up finding were like-minded folks, right? Like-minded people that allowed all of your creativity to be inspired and to come out. And then it just steamrolled. And now you've got this prolific composing career. And so having all my students here, that's something I want to encourage them to be looking for. You can like to play the horn, and some music can be fun to play, and other music may not be your favorite, but if you find like-minded people that really turn your musical vibe on, that's when you're going to shine, and that's when you're going to take off. It's not just the music. It's not just like playing Brahms. It's the people. The people make this field, actually. The music is kind of the vehicle for us to get together. But, once you find the right people, that's when you can really start to open up, because I think for all of us, music is really personal. And that's why we got involved. That's why we stay involved. And, that's finding people who have that same kind of mindset is important. So hearing Jeff's story, like Imani just clicked with him. That's super cool, I think. And it's not really a question, I guess. I'm just pontificating about this, but I was just thinking, man, if Jeff were still sitting there playing Lion King, he may have never gotten inspired. 8 Lion Kings a week may have just killed it, So we're very
too many of these types of web forums. I wouldn't say I've bashed that part of my career, but I've said enough things that if the old MDs ever saw one of these things, they were like, "Well, you didn't seem like you hated it at the time, Jeff." But I've said many a time on webcasts that the group saved me from musical oblivion. Playing Hakuna Matata night after night was just, the brain just shut down. I didn't open the book anymore because the music was memorized within 2 months. It didn't matter. I actually saw the show once because I had relatives come in town. So I took a night off, bought the tickets, sat out there, and I couldn't hear the horns. The music was so canned. I know how hard we worked down there, man. And except for the little exposed solos where they turned the volume up, you couldn't hear. And I just thought, what are we doing? Hear what we do. And they're yelling at us, sending us notes after every show. Do this better. Do that. It doesn't matter. You guys can it so much. Man, I tell you, they saved me. They saved me. You go from that to playing chamber music where if you play a half note, everybody hears it, literally, if you crack one note, but I'd much rather that, I'd much rather have that as a thing to look forward to practice for, that every note that I played was important. That's why we're doing this thing. I see hands up, so I'll stop talking.
Yeah, so one thing I just want to point out, Mary Garza had asked about the book title, so I did put that into the chat. It's The Warmth of the Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. Catherine, I saw your hand go up first, so go ahead. Catherine Marks.
Hi, Jeff. I bought these tickets months ago, but I saw that I'm going to be playing with UMS, I think on Saturday night. And I was wondering what your program is going to be. I forget where I said it. I have it all on my calendar, but could you tell about what you guys are going to do on that concert?
I don't think it was actually made clear. I retired from Imani Winds. I am I'm a full-time teacher now.
That's my mistake. I had seen you play.
No, it's not a mistake. It is not your job to know what I do from.
And I did say he played from 97 to 21, but I didn't say, that sounds like he's still playing with them.
Yeah, I've seen you guys play, I think in 2019, and I just kind of assumed through the pandemic that you guys were still playing. Do you know anything about what they're doing now, or?
I actually do, just because I check in every once in a while. It's my family. So I know they're recently touring a piece by a woman by the name of Jessie Montgomery, fantastic composer and violinist. It's called Sergeant Macaulay. Now, so if they're touring with a string quartet, that's the piece they're playing. They've been touring that a lot recently. If they're not, then I don't know what they're doing. But I know they were recently touring that piece quite extensively. And then they do, each group does a couple of pieces on their own, but that's the big draw on that program for string quartet and wind quintet combined.
Thank you, Catherine, so much for your question. Dina.
Hi. So I was sort of wondering, like, when you started composing, was it like before you started playing horn or after, and what sort of like made you get into that? And I feel like playing horn is like my main focus. And so I'm like, if I wanted to compose something, how would I have the time when I'm like trying to do all these excerpts, So like, how did you sort of get started in that?
I started writing like songs when I was young. I always told my mother I was going to be the Michael Jackson of French horn. I was going to write my own tunes and then I was going to play them, And so I got this multi-track player. You guys probably don't know what a multi-track player is. Man, that's terrible. Well, basically, it's like Acapella, that app, Acapella. You guys know that, right? Because the pandemic, right? It was a very ancient version of acapella. So you played a track and then you could play another track on top and another track on top. And so I would like record myself playing all the different parts of Rock With You by Michael Jackson on French horn. So that was, me first learning how to write out parts. But like I told you folks later, when I was in school, I took an orchestration class, and that's really what got the juices flowing. I took this class; it was an elective, and you took, just classical piano sonatas and wrote them out. You had to score them out for orchestra, and he would say, "Do it for a Mozart-sized orchestra. Do it for a Mahler-sized orchestra. Do it for this," and then reverse. You took an orchestral piece and condensed it down to 4-part choir or a piano part. And so that's where you learned how to, orchestrate, counterpoint and all that stuff. Got out of school and I started playing in this brass band, this jazz band called No Nonet. It was an all brass band with percussion. We had no rhythm section. So if you wrote, you had to be original music because there was nobody wrote music for this. So if you wrote out stuff, you had to actually write out the chords and you couldn't just say it's in blah, blah, blah blues. You had to write out everything for everybody. So I really cut my teeth in that band. You can look those guys up. There's some recordings out. And then when I got into Imani Winds, it was out of necessity. Like I said, I didn't really have composing chops. I just followed what Valerie did. She'd bring in stuff and she voiced it this way. She put the bassoon there, and I bring in my charts. And this is the best part about being in a band and I call it a band because we were really a band, with folks that you love and that love you. So I was horrible. And I'd bring in, 20 bars of music and it would sound terrible. And they'd be like, oh, well, yeah, it's horrible. But if you just fix this and put this there, and by the way, it's not possible on the bassoon, Jeff. And, and they were real patient. And that, again, I was with them for 24 years. So there's a lot of those samples that got handed out. And then I learned and I learned and I learned. But the best part was they would then put the finishing product out for consumption for when we did concerts. And, to have even the simplest pieces that I was writing in the beginning, to have people like applaud for that, it's like, whoa, wow, that's like a drug, It's like, I want to do more of that. And so the encouragement gets you to do more. So I'd just say, like Adam said, you just find people you dig and play and write just 2-line music, horn and oboe, horn and bassoon, get a friend, get in a room, play some stuff, put it in a recital as like an encore, just get, just try. It's very humble means that I started from. I tell you now, I did not start out writing for the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. Let's put it that way. It's extremely humble.
Jeff, do you have a kind of a schedule that you keep between teaching and composing to keep all these things going at once?
Yes, and my 5-year-old hates it. It means composing on weekends when all he wants to do is, play. And so his thing now is he understands the concept of guilt trips. So it's not like, Daddy, are you busy? It's, oh, Daddy, you're going to work now? Like, okay, all right. But yeah, I carve out hours on the weekend. I've also mastered the art after talking to folks like you, Adam, and other folks who have large studios, of how to manipulate my schedule so that I'm not going crazy every day. I used to like try to pack everything into 3 or 4 days and say, oh, then I have a 3 or 4 day weekend. That doesn't work because then you're exhausted, you know, because you packed everything in. So I've learned how to reformat my schedule so that I have free hours and I can do stuff when I'm feeling fresh in the brain. And so yeah, it gets done. I love doing it. That's the big thing. Is I love composing, and so I don't mind doing that as opposed to, you know, something else that other people might do for a hobby. You know, I'd rather be doing that.
Cool.
And we have another question that's coming from Paulina. And I am also going to say at this point, I know exactly what you mean about the 5-year-old coming in and saying, Daddy, you're composing, because I have 3 7-year-olds. I have triplets, and so they come in and interrupt me when I'm trying to compose as well. And on that same work that we're premiering Jeff's work, we're premiering a work by Adam and a work by myself as well. So we'll all get a chance to share the program, which will be fun. Adam wrote a work called River Runs for marimba and horn quartet, and I have a work called Open Space Trust. So Nature Calling for Harmony, look out for that. We'll try to let you know if we get a recording of that and make that available for you. I'm going to be signing off, and I'm going to make Adam the host, but let's turn this over to Paulina for her question.
Was it Paulina or was it Dina?
I think it was Paulina.
Paulina.
Okay.
And Dina,
Hi,
thank you for your question.
Sure. Can you hear me all right? I know I've been having some mic issues. Okay, Zoom. You kind of already mentioned this a little bit, but I was going to ask what your why is. You know, now here at this point in your career of being a teacher, composer, being a father, and you kind of mentioned that because you love it. But I also was, just curious of why do you continue to, you know, pursue these different avenues, and also was wondering how maybe your answer to that question might have changed, you know, as you've matured as a player and a composer.
That's a great question. I have a, I guess you would call him a life coach. I mean, that's kind of a modern term for somebody that I talk to that sort of helps me to keep my focus on what it is that I'm trying to get, you know, accomplish in life. Actually give somebody money for that. It's nuts. But anyway, he constantly reminds me of what I told him back in like 2011 or 12 when I first met him. And he says, well, where do you see yourself in, you know, 10 years, 15 years, and so on? And I honestly told him, it's so crazy because to think about it, you know, I wasn't composing very much at all. I said, I wanted to have a house in Brazil. I wanted to compose for a living, and I want to retire from touring. You know, that was like my top things, you know, like, and so in 2020, whatever, I was going to stop. I was getting off the road. I wasn't married at the time, so I wasn't even thinking about having family, but I knew that touring wasn't something that I could sustain at that level. The group was out. We were out at one point 175 days a year, which is just nuts. It's insane. So I knew that wasn't sustainable. So I'm pursuing my life dream. My goal is to become the best composer that I can be. I've had, in my own gratification, I've had the career in horn to the level that I've wanted to have it. I don't have any aspirations to be third horn in some orchestra somewhere where people my age actually do still pursue those things, but I don't have that. I had 24 years of sweating and, failing and succeeding on stage many, many times. And so that part of my life is satisfied. I still want to play. So I'll, play with my colleagues here at school and any gigs I get called for. But if I could teach and compose and have that be what I do primarily and raise my family, I'm good. I'm good. So that's what I aspire to do. And, I've been really blessed because, I did not ever think I'd be teaching at an institution like Oberlin. That's just, that's just luck, being some great whatever is not like a part of it. There's a lot of great people that try to get these jobs, man. You fall into the right place, you say the right things in the interview, it's just the right timing. It was the right time. So I'm blessed to have this, and it also makes it so that I don't have to tour. I don't have to do blah, 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 and I can focus on the things that I really want to do. And that to me is life's greatest revenge, doing what you want to do.
So you're moving that office to Brazil at some point?
Oh boy, if I could, man. No. But like I said, I'm learning how to negotiate it. You can tell how passionate a person I am. So I get real invested in my students. And so I have to be careful not to spend like all day, every day with them, because I'm like, oh, tell me how your day is going. Next thing you know, we're there for 2 hours with one student. I gotta like chill that out. It's just, but it's just more conducive to the person I want to be. I want to get connected to folks and make sure that I help them, whatever it is they need to get from point A to point B. I want to make sure that I can help that journey a little bit. And then do what it is that I want to do. And that's get better at the craft. So that's it.
Very cool. Any other questions for you guys? Yeah, Cosette.
Hello. Can you hear me? Am I heard? Yes? Okay,
Yeah,
awesome.
now it's perfect. Yep.
Awesome. So you mentioned earlier finally getting the chance to find what you want to say musically. And I was wondering, like, how do you find what you want to say and then translate that through your musicality? And when choosing what to perform, do you gravitate towards a piece that already has something to say, or like using a piece that's already there to say something?
That's a beautiful question, because in all honesty, it changed for me, and I'm sure it changes for most folks. I was at first just happy. I was happy having variety in music. I think primarily when I got out of school, because I was in New York, and especially at that time, it was just like the music community was just thriving. You could play in so many different types of things and call it a career. You didn't have to have a full-time job per se. I'd love that on any given week, I could be doing 4 or 5 different types of performing. For me, that was all that I needed to say I was doing what I wanted to do musically, because it just felt so exciting. But at the end of the day, that actually wasn't what I was wanting to say. It was what I wanted to do. And none of the music, the majority of the music never really spoke to me, like, emotionally or, in any level except monetarily, or to say I did this cool thing. And that only happened when I joined the group, and the questions were asked, like, what do we want to say? And then that was like conversations about like who I am as a person and what's important to me. And so to find that out is to just kind of look within. And I know it sounds like cliche, but you can't look in the Potag excerpt book for your answer in life. that's not going to tell you who you are, what you want to say as a person. That's in here. The rest is what you learn. That's the, that'll be the craft by which you express it. But what you want to say is all within you. And so that question really should be asked of yourself. And I tell all of my students to have a journal that they keep. You can call it a practice journal, you can call it a diary, whatever, and put your 1, 3, 5, 10-year plans in, and also write down anything that I say that actually helped you get better on the horn, and refer back to it. It'll change, but it'll also help you to keep focused on what it is that what you're thinking about in your life. And like, if you ever get off track, or if you ever feel like, just music isn't speaking to you, go back to a time when it was. Go back to a time when you were really like pouring your heart out about like what you want to do. And I'll bet you it'll be a little clearer to you at that point.
All right, James. Thanks, Jeff. That was a great answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to build off that and ask, so you sort of, you know what you want to talk about in your piece. For you, is it a process of like, here's what I want to talk about, and then you try to come up with musical ideas based off of that? Or is it more like you have musical ideas and you're sort of like matching them as you think of what you want to say? If that makes sense.
I mean, what comes first, chicken or the egg kind of thing?
Exactly.
Well, it really depends on how the collaboration comes about. If you have a situation like with Quadre, well, they already have a musical mission and something they want to say, then you're just, you adopt that, you let it, sort of incubate for a while, and you find out how you can be a part of that, to support it and make it come to life even more brilliantly with your addition to it. Then there are other situations where people say, we'd love for you to write a piece and you can do whatever you want. And at that point, the collaboration is me having conversations. Like if I don't already know them, I'll have like a Zoom talk or something, or lunch or coffee with them. Just get like, who are you? And what do you want to say? And what kind of music have you done in the past? And what is your group? Where do you guys perform, and to whom you like to perform? All of that stuff will inform me, because like for instance, yes, I love jazz, I love gospel music, but if it's a group that's never done that and have no interest in it, and they say, hey, please write a piece, what good is it for me to write a gospel piece for them? If they're not even so. Collaborations are about relationships. Music is about relationships. And I know you've probably heard this 1,000 times. Trust me, Adam's telling you the truth. It's about relationships. There's nothing. How you play in the horn section with the rest of the horns is about relationships. Yeah, it stops being a relationship and it stops being a good section. Let's put it that way. You dig? If you're thinking in your mind, this guy sitting in second horn doesn't like me, and I can't wait until he's like blah, 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 blah. You're not thinking about playing the best Brahms one. That's what you're not doing. It's about relationships. And so, no matter how you approach whatever it is you're going to do in music, make sure that you have good relationships, or the best relationships you can have with that circle of folks, because then you can be the best person you can be on your instrument. I guarantee you.